Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Rhonda Williams, and I will serve as the moderator. I'm the Director of Marketing Services for Cornerstone Relocation Group. Cornerstone is a full-service global mobility company, and we provide domestic and global relocation services, policy and program development, and global assignment administration services. As you know from the invitation, the purpose of today's webinar is to review how to prepare your assignees and their families so they're able to acclimate effectively and become productive and happy in their new home in Brazil. We're going to discuss several important areas as outlined in our agenda today. And this webinar is a collaborative effort with one of our trusted destination services partners, Prime Global Group, and Mark Pariser is joining us today from Sao Paulo. Mark is the founder and managing director of PGG. He spent 35 years tending to foreign executives and has vast experience in doing business with multinational companies. In 2008, he created Prime Global Group specifically to address the needs of the Brazilian global mobility market. Mark is a graduate from the College of Business at the University of Illinois and speaks fluent English and Portuguese and is conversational in German and Spanish. So without further delay, I'll turn the presentation over to our presenter, Mark Pariser with PGG. Mark, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank Cornerstone for giving the opportunity to be here and to show the audience what Brazil has to offer. In this presentation, we're going to cover some main points of expatriation in Brazil, as well as some aspects and characteristics that are interesting for most executives that come to live here. So to give you a brief history of Brazil, it was discovered by Europeans in 1500 by a Portuguese expedition. The continent was previously inhabited by indigenous groups and divided by several thousands of different ethnic and linguistic groups. From that point on, Brazil became an overseas colony of Portugal, which later, with the arriving of the slave, it had a great influence on Brazil's culture, religion, cuisine, among others, which we'll go through on the next slides. On the screen, you can see some of the updated information about the country, such as historical dates, population, currency, and climate. Brazil is the largest country in Latin America and is the biggest seventh economy in the world nowadays.
Hi, Mark. It's Rhonda. I'm going to ask our audience to participate in our first polling question. This is a very unique structure that is located in Brazil. It is not a UFO landing site, but it is a fabulous piece of architecture. And we'd like to know if you have an idea in which city in Brazil this structure is located. So take a moment, and you have a choice of 5 cities. Let us know which one you think it is, and then Mark will tell you which one, in fact, it is actually located in and what the purpose and function of the building is. So I'll give you a couple of more moments to vote, and we will see what our results are. So far we have Brasilia is trending as the winner. We'll see if we have some good geography experts online with us today. All righty, Mark, I'll let you go ahead, and looks like Brasilia is our winner, and you can tell the folks if they're right or not.
They're exactly correct. Brasilia is the capital of Brazil, and Brasilia was found in 1959, approximately, and prior to Brasilia, the capital of Brazil was Rio de Janeiro, but at that time, the President Juscelino Kubitschek decided that Brazil needs another capital and someplace there that it could be well planned and well organized. So they decided together with the architect to go ahead and design and make the capital of Brasilia. So that's how we have this building there, which is the Congress. Brazil was heavily influenced by the African culture, which was brought with the slaves and established the roots of the country and a mixture of the main Portuguese culture. There are several other immigrants that I could mention that came along. Italians, the Spanish, Germans, Japanese, they populated Brazil in 1822, right after the independence, and they settled down here. Presently, tourism in Brazil is ranked worldwide, and it's in 6th place, and it's growing heavily. Here we have most of the important cultural places from São Paulo. On the upper left, we have a picture of the Municipal Theater, one of the landmarks of the city due to its architectural and historic value. On the upper right, we have the Pinacoteca, which is one of the most important art museums in Brazil, being the oldest art museum in São Paulo, founded in 1905. On the bottom left, we have the MASP, well known of its architectural structure and distinguished itself by being internationally recognized for its collection of European art, considered the finest of Latin America and the Southern Hemisphere. On the bottom right, we have the Ibirapuera Auditorium, projected by the famous Oscar Niemeyer in the 50s. The construction only began in 2002 and 2005. Between that date, it's a stage of important plays and concerts and shows and seminars that are given in the city. On this slide now, we could show the ethnic groups that are divided in Brazil. 47.3% are Caucasians, 43.10% are browns, which is a mixture between the blacks and the whites. 7.6% are Afro descendants, 2.1% are Asians, and 0.3% are indigenous. Religious aspects. Although the majority of the religious preference is still held by Catholicism, Brazil is a secular state by definition, and here any religious intolerances are prohibited by law. In the graph shown are the Roman Catholic, Protestants, non-religious, spiritualists, and other religions. So each one has its percentage. Political aspects. Brazil is a federal republic with a presidential system divided administratively into 26 states and one federal district, which is Brasilia. The state government is exercised by the action of three established powers: executive, legislative, and judicial. For these powers, the members of the executive and legislative branches are directly elected by the population, while the members of the judiciary are appointed according to specific procedures expressed in the Brazilian Constitution. Business aspects. With the economic stability pretty much consolidated, Brazil found space to explore new models of development, priorities in pursuit of efficiency and economic growth, with the foreign policy aimed at and strengthening of Latin America, as well as trying to reduce the dependence of the major developed nations. Here we can see some of the biggest advantages as well as some of the challenges we find during business in Brazil. Simulation. Now on your screen, some of the characteristics of the Brazilian people in general are both advantageous and challenges when dealing with them, being that business or day-to-day activities. Visa and immigration. There are several different visas that can be obtained here in Brazil, depending on the qualification and the needs of each person and their company. The most are the following. Permanent visa, usually granted to presidents, vice presidents, and some directors of corporations. Their names have to appear in the company's social contract. Investor visa. This visa is granted for a 3-year period when an investor obeys Brazilian legislation by depositing a certain sum of money in the local bank account, and the investor should have a ready investment plan that grants direct and indirect employment for Brazilians. After this period, the investment plan is rechecked by the authorities, and after approved by the visa will get approved and extended. Temporary visa. It's granted for a 2-year period and can be extended for another 2 years, with the possibility to obtain a permanent visa depending on each individual case. Technician visa. The foreign employee does not have to be an employee of the Brazilian branch. This visa is granted for only 1 year and can be renewed for another year. In our presentation, there's other types of visas which are specified. Housing and residential information. here we can summarize the residential information for Brazil, as the neighborhoods are selected according to the expat needs and location of their companies, schools, and other preference the expats have. Housing examples. We're showing now some of the residences that can be found for rent here in São Paulo.
Hi, Walter. It's Rhonda. Could you describe for our audience, what some of these photos are representative of, the type of housing and who might be living in these particular types of residences?
Sure. Let's just go back here a bit. Okay, this is an apartment complex. This is a very high-level apartment complex in São Paulo, which I have a feeling here we're talking about around 6 or 7 or maybe 800 meters of utilized space. So that's around 7,000 square feet. It's a very huge apartment. It's usually presidential or vice presidential level. The facilities are fantastic downstairs. The infrastructure, swimming pools inside, outside, tennis courts, soccer courts, and tennis courts, soccer, and some other amenities which people really at that category loves. So that's one of them. This here is a complex of houses. It's a closed-in complex, and we see these houses here are like for director level. They're houses that are designed for people that like to live in homes instead of apartment buildings. Also, this complex has swimming pools. Usually it has a tennis court or a soccer court. And the security is fantastic of all of these places. Here in São Paulo, we have a security issue, and all these places where the expats live have 7 days a week security, so they could feel comfortable and secure. And with the security controlling these places, it hasn't been any problem for any expat for many, many years. This is also a nice neighborhood where expats live. This is a view of a very huge terrace. This also probably would be director level of an apartment. It's probably less square meters, maybe 400, around there. So maybe 3,500, 4,000 square feet. This is a closed condominium of houses. It also has the same facilities as the ones I mentioned before, and security is excellent. People usually like living in places like this because it gives the family an assurance of well-being. Here we have several towers, which is also a closed, walled-in complex, and each tower has several different measurements of apartments. So it's diversified. So you could have people in there that are director level and even some that are a little bit just management level. This complex also has all the infrastructure that's needed. Living in Brazil differs a bit from other countries by the fact it isn't a cultural thing here to rent furnished apartments in the country. Of course, we can find apartments that are furnished, but usually the furniture is not very selective. One disadvantage in the Brazilian real estate market is you can see on the slides that it's really a quick market. Apartments and residences in general do not stay on this market for a long period of time. And the biggest disadvantage would be the cost. It's expensive to rent a residence here in Brazil, especially in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. Transportation. In 1974, São Paulo residents began using the underground metro system, which is the subway, and nowadays it covers most of the neighborhoods of the city, or at least the most important ones, having 74 kilometers of extension. I'd say like all big metropolises, the peak hours are very crowded, and usually it can be a bit uncomfortable for the users. Automobiles. Today, Brazil is the fourth biggest automobile market in the world. Almost every brand of car maker can be found in the country, and it's an ongoing market. Some of the advantages and the challenges that expats will find when trying to move around the city or will need to visit other cities in the country. Education. Now on the screen we'll talk about Brazilian education. Some private schools in Brazil are attracting partnerships with international schools around the world with pedagogical programs like PYP, Prime Years Program, and IB, which is the International Baccalaureate. These making a curriculum to be the same level the ones found overseas. So this helps a lot of the younger generation that we have in Brazil that want to study overseas. Healthcare. The Brazilian health system is composed of a large public system, and it's managed by the government, and it's called SUS, that's National Health System, which serves the majority of the population. Now we have in the major cities several well-known private hospitals in Sao Paulo, in Rio, in Salvador, in Porto Alegre, major cities where the expats attend whenever they need them. Okay, shopping, dining, entertainment. In Sao Paulo, there are 51 shopping malls spread around the city. Here, for the viewing pleasure, some pictures of the biggest ones. As well as the exclusive supermarkets that can be found in the neighborhoods that the expats live in, such as the Carrefour supermarkets and Walmart. As a commercial center of the country, Sao Paulo gathers most of the big international brands, and the standards of the malls where these stores are located are premium. Also, as most of the major cities around the world, parking always will be a challenge. Dining out. In Brazil, cuisine is a chapter of its own, as you can find any sort of culinary from any part of the world. A typical Brazilian rodizio restaurant where all types of different cuts of meats are served by the waiter in a rotation fashion, and the clients pay a flat fee for this kind of meal. The same system can be applied to other kinds of culinary restaurants like sushi and pizza. They have the same kind of rodizio. The tips here are optional depending on criteria of the service, but as a general rule, we add on 10% of the total amount.
Hi, Mark. It's Rhonda again. We're getting towards the end of our presentation, and Mark's going to speak a little bit more about the different activities, outdoor activities folks can do in Brazil. And I wanted to find out if our audience is familiar with the photo that we have on the slide, this beautiful set of waterfalls. If you might know the name of this particular, it's actually a World Heritage Site that is located in Brazil, and take a moment and vote and tell us what you think the name of this particular set of falls is. And once we get our votes in, we will have Mark explain what the actual answer is. So you have a couple of choices. Oh, good, nobody picked Niagara Falls, because that would be wrong, especially since that's not in Brazil. So we have a pretty even split. That's really interesting between three of the five choices. So we'll go ahead and close the question. And Mark, if you would like to go ahead and tell our audience what the correct location is and maybe give a little bit of an explanation about it, that would be great.
Sure. Foz do Iguaçu it's in the division of Brazil and Argentina, and it's all the way south of Sao Paulo, and it has its own beauty there. It's very, very nice, very different, and most of the local people and tourists like to visit. The attraction is beautiful, and you can get close to the falls, and it's enjoying. It's a nice pleasure trip.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. If you want to go ahead and just finish up the last couple slides, and then we'll take some questions.
Sure. Leisure activities. Family entertainment and sports activities are available here, like golf courses, which are private. There's a lot of public courts for tennis, soccer, basketball, and others. For biking, people usually go to parks, but they also could take a bike path which is surrounded around the city. There are some special bike paths on the main avenues that work on Sundays from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Talking about parks, there are approximately 16 public parks in the city of Sao Paulo with all sorts of leisure activities, shows. It's worthwhile people going to the local parks here when they have the time. Arts, music, and theater. To finalize this presentation, there are some of the most important Brazilian personalities we'd like to point out. But just to mention a couple of them, on the left-hand side of the screen we have Tom Jobim, composer, conductor, pianist, who spent many years of his life living in New York. He dedicated himself to Brazilian music, and one of his famous songs was The Girl from Ipanema. After him, to the right, we have, the third person to the right, we have Oscar Niemeyer, who is considered one of the key figures of the modern architecture in Brazil and around the world, having his most important projects done, Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, and the UN building in New York. So we have these two famous people that really did a lot for Brazil and for international purpose.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. You got a lot of really informative information in there, and I know we have a few questions that have come in, so I would like to go ahead and read those to you, and if you could comment on them, that would be great. The first one is with regards to, it's a visa question. Can one member of an unmarried couple be granted a visa in Brazil?
No, unfortunately, an unmarried couple or married couple, the spouse, if the executive is a man, the spouse cannot get the visa, a working visa here. It's against the rules and regulations, and if a spouse works and she'd like to work in Brazil, other kinds of formats have to be designed for her to obtain a working permit here.
Great. Thank you, Mark. The next question, will my assignees need a driver? Do most companies pay for drivers?
The driver level, usually our companies grant these drivers that we have here too. Depends on the company, really. It all depends on the company and the way it's structured. But presidents, vice presidents, and directors of organizations, multinationals, usually will give driver to these people.
Okay, great. We have another question sort of along the same lines as far as driving. Do employees need assistance in obtaining their driver's license? I understand that the process is more complicated now.
Pardon me, can you be so kind and repeat?
Absolutely. Do employees need assistance in obtaining their driver's license? I understand that the process is more complicated now.
Yeah. Well, we give the employees the assistance for the driver's license. Depends on the country where the employee comes from. It could be a little bit more complicated. If somebody comes from the United States, for example, and has an update driver's license, nowadays it makes it a lot easier to obtain a Brazilian driver's license. And also some countries in Europe have that privilege. Some other ones in Europe don't. It all depends where the person comes from and where he has his driver's license.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple of questions related to housing. One is, how far in advance must rent be paid? I've heard 6 months to a year. Is that accurate?
The way the Brazilian law says is rent here is usually paid on a month-to-month basis after the period of occupation. All multinational companies guarantee the rent if in their social contract they can't guarantee it for whichever reason, they go to the local bank, and the local bank will give a guarantee for the owner of the property. So that's how it works here. There's no need to pay money up front here. Matter of fact, the Brazilian laws don't permit money being paid up front, and they don't like neither deposits.
Okay, great. And we have time for one more question, and it is, do employees need any specific vaccinations before moving to Brazil?
There is no specific vaccinations to come down to Brazil. Just if somebody's coming down from a country that has a certain problem, which then in that case there might be some specific vaccination necessary, but in general, no.
Okay, great. Well, that does it for our questions in our webinar today. And as you can see, we have on our concluding screen, we have our contact information. If you would like to reach out to Mark or his partner Walter, you have their email, phone number, as well as website. And the same goes for Cornerstone. If there's any questions that we can answer for you, please do not hesitate to contact me. And I'd like to thank Mark very much for joining us all the way from Brazil and for the wonderful information. And I want to thank everyone for joining us on the call today, and I hope the rest of your day is outstanding.